You either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And today we have gone back in time.
We have.
To ye old times. Specifically to kind of our neck of the woods, just a state over.
Truly. Well, yeah, no, my neck of the woods. I live out this way.
No, they never get to your site.
They don't. Yeah, no, everybody doesn't make it. But they were gonna.
We're covering ye old classic 1948's Red River.
Honestly, we were gonna have to cover more of the one, the only, John Wayne eventually. And what better one to start with than with Red River?
Yeah, one of the more classic ones, the one that established him as kind of the bad boy of the Wild Wild West.
It most certainly did. It gave him the reputation. I mean, he already had acting credits under his belt, but this really set him apart. Like, he had been in the industry a while, and I think it was the director is quoted as saying, like, yeah, I've known him a long time, but who knew the son of a bitch could act?
Yeah, I do remember that in the commentary or the special features of the DVD.
Yeah, so like this definitely set him, and not just in any direction, but specifically in the direction that I think most people remember him as, which is the hard and roughened cowboy.
Yeah, because the first movie that I know made him big was Stagecoach.
It sure was, and this has a lot of similar elements. I mean, you know.
It's a Western. They all kind of have almost the same elements, just slightly rearranged.
They sure do. This one is, I would argue, the most Western-y of Westerns. It's a great example of having every element, like, you can think of mushed in here. We've got the ladies' drama, we've got the cattle moving, we've got all the way from Texas all the way up to what should have been Missouri, but, didn't make it.
Colloquial names for Native Americans.
Yes, a lot of Native Americans. Yeah, it's very much a gunslinger with more elements put in. It's got the whole father-son element, which honestly did come up to be a rather standard trope in the Western world.
There's a little bit of gayness in it, too.
Again, a trope in the Western world. And also, it really established this idea of, like, tough men don't talk about their feelings. Like, it was already a thing. This is where, like, the solidifying it as, like, a classic standard really hits home. Partially because of how well this movie did. This movie was not just, like, a success necessarily in, like, critics, but, like, it made money right out the gate. Critics loved it right out the gate. It was immediately up for awards. It never did bad, and so it really helped solidify a ton of the standards we see throughout the rest of the Western genre.
Yeah, and this is, like, the only movie, well, one of the few movies that the only film-related class I had in college. Mm-hmm. This was the first Western we watched.
And the other reason why it's honestly still a classic Western is because it still looks fairly decent and it still sounds fairly decent. Mm-hmm. A lot of these Westerns were, very grainy, very hard to see, and a lot of these actors were incredibly hard to hear. Thankfully, John Wayne's voice was so specific and unique that it picked up really well on these old shitty mics, and that also kind of helped because he does sound very specific. There's nobody else in the industry who sounds or walks like this man.
He's the Duke.
He is the Duke.
And for Father's still listening, I remember that comment from something I made of a slander of him years ago.
And he was also the box office name. John Wayne was the box office name for almost 3 decades. Which is a long time to hold that title.
I'm aware. I remember the TV infomercials that were like the John Wayne collection.
Yes, my grandfather had all of them and a poster of him in the basement. And yeah, there's a reason why he was like the person. Like, this man was in so many movies, like 179-ish movies, I think.
Something like that.
It was a crazy number for back then.
So for those unfamiliar with Red River, it's about a cattle driver who, after 14 years of working the land, in desperation because the Civil War has left the South very poor, has to head up north to sell his herd.
He does, and there's a really interesting dynamic with his adopted son, and then more background characters come into play, and he's got this weird friend who, honestly, I don't know what he does, but he's in the whole movie.
He's the narrator.
He is the narrator in the version we watched.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get into that. So, Red River is based on the Board and Chase 6-part series, The Chisholm Trail, which was originally published serially in the Saturday Evening Post.
Yep.
It was screenplayed by Chase and Charles Schnee, which I guess Chase didn't do a great job of adapting it, so Schnee had to come in and zhuzh it up a little bit.
Sure did.
It's directed by Howard Hawks and co-directed by Arthur Rosen. Stars John Wayne as Thomas Dunson, Montgomery Clift as Matt Garth.
Yep, another big name.
Joanne Drew as Tess Millay.
Sure did.
And Walter Brennan as Nadine Groot / the narrator.
Yes. There are a lot more people who, if you are into Westerns or if you're into the older films, their names are also big names. This was a very star-studded cast. But those are the ones that you're going to be on screen the most. But there was around 8 people who the director and Wayne himself felt were like the core of this cast. And we'll talk more about like why later.
Yes. So our sources for today's episode include interviews by Peter Bogdanovich, Molly Hasek, Lee Clark, and Borden Chase from the Criterion DVD.
Yes.
As well as Howard Hawk interviews by Scott Breville.
I also found numerous sources on the fabled John Wayne belt buckle, something I will talk about extensively towards the end.
I don't know why, but when you brought up belt buckle, my mind just went to the DVD cover of Pootie Tang.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why.
Not the same thing. We will get to the infamous mystery of John Wayne's belt buckle.
Okay. Not the Pootie Tang one.
Not that one. No, not that one at all.
And I'm going to state before we really get into the movie, we are reviewing the theatrical version since it's closest to the original idea that Hawks had. The only difference is really the ending and opening book reading because it was too long and the ending was edited because Hawks straight up plagiarized a Howard Hughes second and last movie he directed, The Outlaw.
Yeah.
And even Chase told him that he ripped off the ending and he couldn't do that ending, but Hawks still did it.
Yeah, and I know in the interviews, depending on when the interview happened, they talk about, well, which one is the one that was most like the director's vision? No one truly knows. In some of his interviews, he talks about how the theatrical version is truly closest to what he was imagining. It got most of it down. And then later in his life, he's quoted as saying, no, the pre-release version is what I always imagined. However, both times he has been well known for giving tall tales.
Yes, and, well, okay, so to clear that up a little bit, he did say it specifically, is the theatrical version is his version up until the end.
Yes.
Because he thought the first version was too long, and then the pre-cut version somehow got released as supposedly his version because someone thought, oh, it's the longer version, this must be the director's cut. And so people assume that. So, yes, the theatrical version is almost his version, but it's also not at the same time because he preferred the long cut of the end better, but that had to get edited out of the theatrical version. So if you do have the Criterion version, the best recommended, and I think Bogdanovich was the one who recommended it, watch the theatrical cut up until like the very end when John Wayne comes into the camp.
Yeah.
Or the town.
And then, just for some fun history, why are there 2 versions? So there was some cutting to be done, however, the longer version was lost for a very long time, and thankfully was refound. As far as I can tell, the only reliable source to watch it is the Criterion's collection. It was on TV for on and off for a while. I remember watching it a little bit when I was a kid. I know it was on in the 70s, on and off for a bit, which did cause a lot of confusion for people as to which one is the movie that you're supposed to be watching.
Yeah.
And it helped, allude to the fact that also the director, who's famous for telling a few fibs here and there to elaborate his stories. So
yeah. Well,
so it's nice that we at least found it again.
It's also almost a 75-year-old movie, so...
Yeah, and a lot of his interviews, especially later in life, but much like we've talked about with other directors, is very much just a trip down memory lane for him, and not necessarily him in his full, movie director cognizant abilities. Which is fun, and I really appreciate, but, a lot of people who worked with him were yeah, no, that's not true at all.
So... Chris, before we get into it, what are we drinking today?
Well, it'd only be appropriate for a John Wayne if we had a bourbon whiskey.
TX bourbon.
Delightful.
Cheers.
Cheers. It is good.
Yeah, quite like it. So, we open up on Red River with very beautiful landscape and credits, and that's part of the reason we studied this movie first when I took a class on Westerns, was this was one of the ones that was heavily about the landscape itself, and was heavily prominent compared to I think other contemporaries of the time.
Yes.
I haven't really gotten into too many westerns pre this.
Sure.
And most of mine are spaghetti westerns, which already have that influence from this genre.
They sure do. This one, this movie really does stand out with its, like, almost cinematography artsy version of landscape, especially the Texas landscape, which, despite them trying, literally, like, that's the whole point of the movie, is to not be in Texas anymore. They spent a lot of time in Texas. And on top of that, the amount of horseback riding and cattle wrangling that is shown in this movie is incredibly impressive.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's part of it, too, is Hawks was never at least in his westerns, wasn't a dynamic director. I haven't seen a lot of his filmography, so I can't speak to it.
Sure.
But specifically in Red River, he is very simple in his shooting. And that's what I think works with it so well, is it's not like many, I'd say, modern adaptations where they try and make it more action-based instead of, like, for example, the Ben-Hur remake that's a lot of upfront and close to the horses, at to the chariot level.
Yeah.
This is more, it's almost theatrical at times, too, where the camera's far enough away and you know it's not in the scene, or it's not proscenium framing, but it's close. It's a very static shot.
Yes, and a lot of that will make sense once you realize that you have seen a lot of Howard Hawks stuff. He directed Scarface, Bringing Up Baby, for me, Rio Bravo, The Thing from Outer Space, but he was a very versatile director. And so a lot of people don't realize that it's all his stuff.
So, quickly looking through his list, Bringing Up Baby is the only other movie of his I've seen.
You will love Scarface when we inevitably get to it. That is going to be right up your alley. Okay. And I do think you would also enjoy Thing from Outer Space. It's one of his a little bit more silly ones, but yes. Like, he was a very versatile actor. He really didn't try and pigeonhole himself in one way or another. A lot of people consider him one of the greatest American directors of all time because of his versatility. Yeah, and I think it shows well in Red River.
I know his name. That's about it. It's
totally understandable. But yeah, no, I think him having such a wide interest in different genres of movies helps make Red River better, because it's not, like, at no point does it feel pigeonholed into that almost theatrical stage version of a Western. And it somehow, despite literally most of this movie being in the middle of nowhere, Texas, somehow escapes being in the void of Ye Olde West. And I say that because I think a lot of the way he filmed Ye Olde West changes versus a lot of other Westerns versions. Okay. His use of having these big panoramic shots, the emphasis on cattle and showing the mounts of cattle, having an established, like, setting up of a, like, essentially a town, a ranch, really goes a long way in making Red River stand apart from a lot of Westerns that came before it, which honestly didn't have a whole lot of cinematography as far as, like, showing off the landscape, showing off shots, showing off day versus night.
Yeah, I think they mentioned that Westerns at the time were dime novels.
They very much were. And the other thing that really makes a difference is Hawks had a very love-hate relationship with Technicolor. It was widely available and used at this point. However, he didn't like it, and he thought it cheapened and the realism of the movie. So he shot in black and white. In
one of the interviews, he said the opposite.
I know he did, but he said the original the first time round when he was interviewed as a much younger man.
Okay, so
and I'm taking his much younger advice, because when he was older, there's a lot of rambling that contradicts directly with himself.
Because Technicolor was available at the time. I mean, what was it? I think a decade before Wizard of Oz came out, but to be fair, at the time too, color wasn't really that prevalent in cinema or in television until about 2-3 years later. Like,
very true.
Mid-50s is when it became more popular.
Oh, yeah. And also think about how it was used. A lot of those movies were much more fanciful. They were much more like fairy tales, and he was looking to make Red River feel as realistic as possible.
Yeah. So we get like we said, this movie starts with the book opening.
It does.
And it establishes everything we need to know in, like, the first 2 minutes.
Which I love. Tell me everything.
It's the early tales of Texas, setting the Chisholm Trail's first drive, gives us the dynamic to give us Thomas Dumpson and Matthew Garth and the Red River Drives. And it's very old.
It sets it all up.
Yeah, it's a very old school style opening that I think works for back in Ye Olde West, X, Y, and Z happen.
I also think it works really well for this sort of storytelling, just because even though we really only have, like, 3 main people, we do see a lot of people who are all given names and backstory, and being told right up front where I am, who I'm interested in, and what the idea is supposed to be, really helps keep this story going.
Yeah, and it doesn't, that's why I think part of what makes that work is it doesn't bog the rest of the movie down. And that's what, again, Hawk said is, in one of the interviews, is he preferred to make 2 or 3 good scenes and then don't bother the audience with the rest. We'll figure it out on our own, which I think is, I think I have to, we'll figure it out on our own at the end. But I think that's a great way to shoot a movie, is if you get bogged down in the details, you lose the core of the movie.
Yes.
And we get that from the very get-go. It's like, hey, here's what the movie. It's going to be some type of story between Dunson and Garth.
Yep.
And from here, we cut to some other trail of Dunson and the narrator named Dean leaving that train in 1851, which honestly, I'm going to harp on this quite a bit.
Okay.
The landscape.
Oh, it looks great.
Is so beautiful. Just bringing in the train to the screen is a simple shot that works so well.
It gives so much more depth than a normal Western. Like, this does not feel like a stage at all. You really feel like you are here.
Yeah. Well, it also is a good way to, in the scene, we get the setup of Dunson. He's the stereotypical badass, and he's good with a gun.
Yep.
A little bit of old school sexism where...
This movie's rampant with problems, guys. Like, let's get that straight out the gate.
It's from 48. We'll give it a little bit of leniency there.
Oh, yes. No, there's a lot, but if you can, put a pause on some of it, it is interesting to also see the development of what they think a young Wayne looks like, because they definitely, like, this role was meant for him.
Yeah.
And then they went, well, shit, we need a younger man to play younger Wayne. How do we find someone who can do that?
Well, and also how they made a woman progressive in this movie. And, I mean, hell, if we look back at Bringing Up Baby, that's a very different type of woman, but in a comedic way. This one, I think it's funny because they set up how dangerous the land is.
Yeah.
But he's trying so hard that it's like, it's too much for a woman out in the West. And she's like, but you'll protect us. And then, you know what? I'll give you something at night. I'll give you what you need to get through the day. It
is interesting too, because we see this dynamic, and it's almost like a character development, because the women at the beginning of this movie are so different than the women later in this movie.
The woman? There's only 2 women in this entire movie.
There are 3. There are 3 women. They don't talk to each other.
Who's the third?
There's like a random background girl cooking.
That doesn't count. That does not count as the third woman. There are only 2 female characters in this entire movie, and this one is on screen for like 2 minutes before she dies.
Oh yeah, no, like there's not great. Like if you're a woman looking for women cowboys, this isn't the movie for you. We will eventually cover the women cowboy movie. Don't worry. But like, yeah, no, there's not a lot of ladies, but also like, this is more of a movie about a really stubborn man and his adopted son. So, like, I'm okay with, like, schooling how much emotional stuff we have to have John Wayne, who famously looks a little bit constipated all the time. Like,
who's more constipated, John Wayne or John Voight in Anaconda?
I'm gonna give it to John Voight, specifically in Anaconda. Partially because this is a younger Wayne. This is not youngest Wayne. This is a younger Wayne, and he hasn't gotten the line between his eyebrows just yet.
Okay.
He's still fairly smooth, younger, middle-aged man in this one. He doesn't have the full bow leg either, which is eventually a Wayne classic.
Got a little chub going to him.
Yeah, I mean...
We're not talking about a penis, just he's a bit chubby.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
But no, this is a Wayne that has not yet, like, fully developed into the Wayne that we all remember, partially because I think a lot of us were introduced when he was at like the end of his career, and he had spent a lifetime riding horses for cinema, and like he had just developed into what you imagine, like that caricature. He hasn't quite gotten there yet. He's still a little bit baby faced.
So I'm gonna admit, I haven't watched a lot of John Wayne. Most of my westerns are spaghetti westerns or foreign westerns. So.
Understandable. And there is a lot of Wayne to get through, and not all of them are worth your time.
Yeah, so this is about the era of Wayne that I'm used to.
That's understandable. And honestly, like, I think if it had not been for family members whose obsessions with Wayne ran long and deep, I probably would not have had the breadth of Wayne to watch either. I
can see that. I mean, whenever I'm in town... Or when I've been at my Omaha, she's like watching Bonanza or something.
Oh, yeah, no, this was like a classic. Wayne.
Also, speaking of some of the filmography or cinematography in this scene is it is a little rough for a modern audience. The projection of the train in the background being really, really fuzzy is a bit rough.
It is, but honestly, especially compared to other movies around the same time, it does look fairly good compared to those. Like, yes, it's a little rough, but I've seen worse.
To be fair, also Criterion restores, so...
They do, and the other thing to remember, too, is also this movie, while it has... The Criterion does a good job of trying to maintain the aspect ratio as best they can, these movies were not meant to be viewed on this nice, fancy flat screens we have. Watching it on a fuzzy static TV does honestly help clarify some of the fuzziness.
Nice, clean 35mm.
Yeah, I mean... It for what it was and how much scrubbing it has gone through, I think it looks pretty good. Mm-hmm. Especially since, like, a lot of this has been restored in some way or another. And restoring can go one of two ways. It either makes it look way better, or, like this one, a little bit fuzzy.
Just a tad. But Dunson finds the Red River and Texas, but oh no, we have natives attacking the last train, which I think it's supposed...
Very exciting.
Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong. The representation of Native Americans in this is very standard cowboys and Indians styled. Everybody has guns, everybody has bows and arrows. There's a lot of flaming arrows being shot at people.
Minus one character.
Minus one character who is a caricature of real people, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and I think also in this movie it's mainly the Comanche the whole time.
Yeah.
But also... This part's kind of funny to me because they're just like, oh, we can't go back for them. It's a couple hours back. And I know what it's trying to do. It's trying to establish that how harsh the West is that he went the route that he thought was going to, or that he knew was going to get him the cow land he wanted. But she was going to be safe with them. And now because, the twists of fate, she's dead. But also, he doesn't even try that hard.
Oh, no, he doesn't try hard at all.
Well, that's a couple hours back. She's probably already dead. Or she might be out there. She's dead.
She's dead. No, everybody in this movie is dead. If they are left off screen, they're dead. The other thing, though, is I do agree. I think it is definitely setting up the harshness of living in the West. Or, in this case, Texas. But... I also think that this is attempting to be a little bit of a foreshadowing for later, and in the future version of what's happening. It's happened so early, and this movie's honestly so long. Unless you watched it 4 times in a row like I did, I don't know if you'd necessarily catch that.
Well,
but I do think if you had been reading the story that came out every week, I do think you would have caught it. I think you would have been one of those readers that it cliff ended, now what's going to happen next? That would have been fresh in your mind. I can see where that's coming from.
Yeah, I guess. It's kind of just it's taking the standard trope of, they'll meet again in the future and just completely getting rid of that because...
Yes, 100%.
They're camping, they get attacked. And of course,
everybody's getting attacked.
John Wayne being the manly man, he overcomes.
Of course he does. It's John Wayne.
Yeah, and firmly establishing woman's dead.
Yeah, well, there's a couple people in this movie that, they are super dead. Yeah. We really extra killed them. Hmm? She's one of them.
Well, in 10 minutes, we've got romance, the manly man, and the Comanche attack.
That's true. And
and death.
And death. And while it is not necessarily by today's standards a great opening to a movie for a lot of reasons, I do think it is one that sets up the expectations of death and excitement in this movie. Because I think those two things really propel the main character, John Wayne, that John Wayne's portraying.
Mm-hmm. And it's also because... Right after this, they wake up and it looks grim. They're just going to continue on. And we get kid with PTSD getting slapped.
Oh, this was my favorite part. This poor child comes out mumbling in the bushes. And what's John Wayne's first instinct? Slap, slap. Slap, 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 slap.
Yeah, it's like Star Trek random woman punch.
Oh no, I 100% believe that Star Trek got the trope from the Westerns where people are just slapping for no reason.
Oh, 100%. Oh, 100%. But I think it's also to establish that, I know it's to establish that the West is hard for even the young. That even if you survive, you still have to be a man. You're expected to be on the same level of Dunson.
For sure, and it is also justifying the audience to Dunson's harshness, because he is a man who is already roughened by his environment and his life, and that attitude is going to be a sticking point throughout the whole movie. But you feel justified with him in his, in his actions, because, we just watched a ton of people get murdered.
Yeah, he's trying to keep the kid alive and also at the same time be like, I've got a bull. I'm going to take your cow with me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
at no point is Dunson a perfect character, but you always see his logic, but you also can see everyone else's complaints with him from the get-go. And I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like an overly good or overly gray character. He's just that guy.
Yeah. And to counter that, I would say that Matt, the young PTSD boy, is more on the goody two-shoes, like the very young idealistic side, which is a nice contrast because he very
especially
much,
compared to Dunson.
Exactly, because he's very much the figurehead of youth, even though, he's seen some shit after the time jump.
Yeah.
And Dunson has seen stuff way before that kid was even born.
But it also very much feels like someone being very stuck in their ways versus someone who's ready to try new things. And in the most stereotypical Western of versions.
Yeah, it's a very much at times a story about faith versus tradition. Well,
in a way. In a way.
Belief and hope, I'll say. Not necessarily faith in the religious context, but belief in another way.
Yes, I can see what you mean.
Well, they travel to the Rio Grande and sets claims to 2,000 miles of land, or they travel 2,000? I can't remember 100%.
A lot. He just, and I love how the movie portrays it. He just, walks out there and he goes, "This is now mine." And, that's it.
Yeah, eminent domain. Well, not eminent domain. What was the term?
It's not a land grab.
No, it's specifically manifest destiny.
Yeah, well, he sure as hell did that. It helps that there's nobody out there to tell him otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really like the scene that's about to come up where he talks about, what his vision for his life is.
Well, there is someone who challenges him.
That's true.
Well, first off, I do like that there's branding back in the day that he's like, here's what will be our mark.
But it's also kind of a creative brand. I'll give him that. And
it's also a way to set up that the kid wants his own brand right away, and that it shows his ambition where he's like, you'll get it in time. So father-son relationship, but also kind of a little bit of rivalry there. And
it also very much feels like, I like that they set up from the beginning that he does feel like an overly ambitious youth.
Mm-hmm.
Of course the, 14-ish-year-old boy isn't going to have his own head of cattle yet. He has no idea how to run a ranch. He has no idea how to move cattle. He has a singular cow. But I admire his gumption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he's got that.
He's got the drive.
Pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality.
He sure does.
But, like I said, the land's not safe. It is Don Diego's land, and now we're introduced that very loosely that, hey, we not only do we have the Comanche, we have the Mexican/Spaniards as the enemy, which it's just a way to build up how tough he is and his claim to the land as he kills the man to show his dominance and be like, also, this is finally where we do see his gunmanship.
Yes, because the gunmanship is honestly very impressive.
Yeah, and it's just like, hey, come here, come and take the land if you really want it.
Yeah, no, standard Western-esque trope, very John Wayne.
Mm-hmm. But it also is to establish that he's a decent man where he's going to give them a proper burial. So he might kill, but he's a man of faith. Yeah,
I appreciate that they start from the get-go with these standards because those standards almost feel degraded and false much later.
Yes.
But by having them shown at the beginning of the movie, you can empathize with Dunson's character.
Mm-hmm. He's just a man out on the
trail trying to make his way through Texas.
Yeah, it's a real, in a way, kind of Noah story where he's leading two of a kind of cows on a land boat.
And then he talks about it here in this next scene where he wide sweep is and in 10 years, this is going to be the biggest ranch in all of Texas. I'm going to have so many cows, they're going to feed every person in America.
Specifically, we're going to have enough beef to feed the whole country. Good beef for hungry people.
And I'm not going to lie, I did feel a little bit like an ad.
Oh, yeah.
For beef. I know it's not. I know it's a very seriously written line because the beef ad that we all are thinking of was not released until about the early 90s, sponsored by the Beef Corporation of America.
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Beef, it's what's for dinner, was on every billboard for a while. We'll get into it a different time, but it's not that. I promise this well predates the organization that put on that ad. It just feels incredibly pointed.
Fun fact, Alaska doesn't have billboards, so that's probably
Alaska doesn't have a lot of beef industry.
I don't know. We had Burger King and McDonald's.
You do. We had cows.
Yeah. No, yeah. So that explains why I didn't see that, because I was living in Alaska at the time, and then 2000 I lived in Germany, so I didn't have American billboards.
Well, in by 2000, we had moved from beef to the dairy industry with the Got Milk. Yeah, it feels like a pointed ad. I know everyone who watches this movie from nowadays mindset's gonna be like, wow, I'm being retargeted again. No, it's just that's how this character thinks. But I like that he says it this way, because even though it is kind of ad-esque, it gives us a standard for what he thinks and justifies his life with. Mm-hmm. He thinks he is truly doing a great good by having all this land, by taking this young guy under his wing and not letting him ruin it yet, because all these people are depending on him for food.
People in the future. And it's very much so setting up the building your land and starting from the ground zero.
Oh yeah, he's a self-made man for sure.
Yeah, as we would call an entrepreneur today.
He would have hated that term.
I know. I kind of hate it at times, too. But from here, we get a nice transition of fast-forwarding 15 years to set up the dilemma. We do see the graves growing, which means he's killed some more people who's tried taking his land. Matt's been away at war, and now we're setting up that, hey, there's not enough money to really keep this up. Texas ain't got the market for beef. To remind people, the South has always been traditionally the poorer part of the U.S., and the war made it even poorer, so it does historically tie into the era.
No, this tied in so well that, there was a very similar dispute and action that happened in real life with the first movement of cattle from Texas up to the Oklahoma and Missouri area. A lot of people think this is based on that. I can't find anything saying for sure this is 100% based on that. There are a lot of similarities, though. I will give you that.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, it sets up kind of our standard Wild West of it's Texas beef, so they're going to bring it up. And specifically...
Oh, sure. It was a standard for a long time. Still is.
Yeah. I mean, that's why Omaha's has its...
It's one of the biggest auction houses in America.
And stockyards. Same with San Antonio, which granted, I didn't do any research, so I don't know what cities were established at this time. But they are setting up the goal of going to Missouri.
Yes, which... at the time period, would have just been better grazing and closer establishment to St. Louis, which would have been an easy transport for slaughtered cattle all the way back to the big cities for, honestly, just for sale. But the idea of moving cattle from Texas up was, this is the time period where people really started to do that, as opposed to processing and then putting on train to move.
Yeah. No, it's old times where we don't have refrigeration, so...
No, and this also predates Texas's true supremacy on the beef industry. They were always the biggest grazing land, however, they were not necessarily the biggest in the shipping and processing.
Surprisingly, Texas was a state at this time.
Oh, yes, it was. However, it was a contextual state. There was a lot of people who did not care that they got the memo that they were a state.
It's like New Mexico, and where the reason they have a bilingual constitution is because there's a bunch of Mexicans who didn't have a say.
Yeah, they're like, no, we didn't agree to this. No, Texas went through a very similar but honestly lengthy period of time. It's where a lot of the whole Spanish problems that the movie shows is trying to come from. I don't think they do a very good job of explaining that.
No,
but
and
whatever.
It's not necessary for the movie.
It's really not, because we're mostly interested in Dunson's terrible use of his son.
Oh yeah, exactly. And also with our terrible use of history. Texan listeners, I know it's your hobby to study your history to the T.
I don't care.
But yeah, no, it's a good scene to set up the dynamic, because we get their little bit of banter where it's not really an argument, but it's kind of poking fun at each other, where you got the bullheaded older man, the manly young man, and the even older man who's just kind of there for the ride.
Oh yes, and honestly, all of them play such an important version of the Western man that it is impossible to get rid of one of the trio, despite the fact that, in theory, our friend Mr. Groot could go. He's not technically necessary for the plot, but he is there to, be almost the, sounding board for both men. And it helps the audience understand, why did you just smack your son? Or why did you just beat up your dad?
I have to disagree with that. I think the older man is more so the sounding board for Dudson, whereas Matt very much so is... Matt doesn't need that backing. He has his own moral compass, and he doesn't need the experience of the elderly to guide him.
Oh, no, he's never asking for guidance, but he does monologue out loud as far as, like, he never, like, trusts me with this, or he never lets me take my idea here. And even though we get shown that, being able to hear the son's, like, disgruntledness with how his father runs things, and yet continues to go along with it for so long, I think helps, like, the audience also build a bit of a resentment to Dunson.
Well, it's also to show that he's a loyal son at the same time.
He really is, yeah.
Stereotypical, idealized...
Slapping people's normal in this world. Yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah, no, they, like, slap each other for the whole movie.
Oh,
and it's
okay.
fine.
I know what you're meaning. Yeah, no, it's a idealized trait.
It is.
But it's also to show that Matt's coming in his own and is also Dunson's happiness. You can clearly see that Dunson loves Matt and cares for him, even though he won't say it to his face, because to say that admits you have feelings and means you're not a man.
True.
Very stereotypical Western trope where men show their emotions by action, not through word.
Oh, 100%.
100%. And you never say love. That's for the woman to say. You just reciprocate and sow your seeds.
Yeah, except for this movie where we only slap people. That's how you show true love. You slap them.
There's a hint of sowing your seeds.
It's suggested, but this is a fairly clean movie, surprisingly.
Yeah, we're still in the Hayes era, so it's gonna be a clean movie regardless.
True, but also, like, there's... Most of the death happens off screen. There's not a whole lot of, like, oh my gosh, so-and-so is on their deathbed. It's everything's pretty, like, quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or glossed over.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we also learned that a lot's changed on the ranch. Dunson's not as honest as he used to be.
Yeah.
He's stealing other ranchers' cattle, but when confronted, he's still honest, but he's also setting up the danger of the drive of, like, hey, yeah, the reason your cows are with us is because your drive failed and they showed back up at our ranch. And so, hey, you know what? He twisted a little bit where he's like, here, I'll pay you this much for the heads we sell of yours. We gotta stick together. It's hard times. I might be dishonest, but at least I'm honest when you come up to me.
Yeah, and it makes it more difficult because there's still a lot of good points made in the movie about, like, why you should trust Dunson at all. And, like, yeah, you know, sure, he's done some little bit seedy business, but, like, he is honest.
Yeah, and also at the same time, it's like, well, you guys don't have the men or enough cattle that's worth sending a full run-up. I, on the other hand, do. I've got, like, 900 heads that I can take up. I've got, like, maybe 5 of yours, man.
Yeah. No, it's always logical. It's just not necessarily fun logic.
But it's also to show how desperate everyone else is. It's not just Dunson's clan and his ranchers.
Yeah, no, everyone in Texas is hurting.
Exactly. So it really drives, hey, we need to do this as quickly as we can. We also get introduced to a bit of a more side character, Cherry Valance, who I feel is supposed to be a bit of a more main character, but we don't get as much because it is hinted that, there's going to have a fight between Matt and Cherry. And also there's very stiff conversations here that shows the movie's age. And one of the scenes that kind of reads a little bit differently this time, watching it in a more modern context, it's the dick sizing competition between Matt and Cherry, which I know
It's a little funny.
It's a little funny. It's supposed to show that, hey, they're sizing each other up, seeing who's better with the gun, to, like, say, hey, I have superiority over, I'm the young buck around here.
But the other one's coming in with, you know, a hot shot and a title too.
Yes. Well,
they both do.
Cherry doesn't know yet.
That's true.
Matt's the only one who has, like, a real name to him. Cherry's the newcomer.
Yes.
But this is also the part where their relationship feels a little on the homosexual side.
But you know what? It's a cowboy movie. Everything's a little gay.
Specifically, there's a couple lines that they say where Valance is testing a little bit more, where he's asking the question, have you ever had a beautiful woman or a good Swiss watch? Well, neither have I. And then also, I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Yeah, there's a lot of hinting like that. And it also doesn't help that the actor who plays Matt was known, even by this point, as, like, the handsome young man of the era. Montgomery Clift was an OG method actor, and, like, he was traditionally cast as, like, the handsome youth of Western films. And so, like, he was already supposed to be the love interest, but we have not run into any alive lady to love yet. Yeah, it's like... So, like, he's on screen. Somebody's gotta like him.
It's like Brokeback Mountain. You got sheep or you got another dude.
And, like, while the movie's never very explicit with all that, it is just a standard trope in these old westerns where everything feels just a little too personal for no goddamn reason.
Yeah, it's just to show who's the more manly one around here.
Sure.
This whole movie is basically a dick's showing competition.
And in case you were wondering, Nico, he was meant to be a bit more of a main character because he was part of the Belt Buckle Brigade. We will get to later.
Okay. But it's the night before the drive. We get a little bit more that, hey, it's not so segregated as we would have thought.
Yeah, it's a rough world out here. We gotta stick together.
Yeah, you've got the Irish in the group, which people gotta remember, people hated the Irish at this time.
Yes.
Like, actively hated the Irish. And that's why they moved west, is because no one wanted them in New York. And also you have the natives within the group.
Yes.
Which everyone's poor and scattered from the war.
We're all trying our best.
Still technically in Indian territory.
It is dangerous. Yeah.
Native American territory. Harsh lands. They've got border gangs that they gotta deal with down the line.
Yep.
But this is also... Dunson can set up his ironclad rules of the drive, as there will be no deserters. If you sign up, you are in this till death do us part, basically.
And you feel justified in it, because before we left, he asked, if you don't want to go, you don't have to, no hard feelings. But if you say you're going, god damn it, you're going.
Yeah, and even then, you'll still get paid if you don't go.
Yes.
But it's to show everyone's manliness of, like, of course I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
I'm a man. I'm not gonna be that man who stayed back, whereas, like, one of the guys, and they bring that up too, where one of the guys is like, I just got married, my wife, and he's like, I understand you don't have to. He's like, no, that's why I need to go, is I have to do this for her.
Yeah. And it does help so much justify the rigidness of the rules, because you do feel like he has given outs to people, even though in reality that's not how that works. Like, obviously people do not realize halfway through that they are about to be, like, murdered. You know? You never know. People should be allowed to just change their minds, potentially. But not in Dunson's world. He doesn't say so.
He is the law, and he's the judge, jury, executioner. And
he's sharp with a gun. It's, like, well known. So, like, you probably won't win. You're not going to draw faster than him.
Unless you got the numbers, and even then.
And even then, because they proved to us that won't help you either.
Nope. But the drive begins with a bit of ominous and darker tone, and that's just the filming of it. I think it's partly because it is morning when they shot, but it's a nice setting up of, like,
sure,
this is an arduous task. It's not going to be bright and sunny to start off. With lots of close-ups that, remember, 30 years ago, the close-up of the faces would have been scandalous, like in Hexen. It
would have. And also, it would have been, like, this movie is a fairly long movie for 1948, at 133 minutes if you're on one version. So having all these close-ups while cinematographically wise looks really great and adds a lot. And also, like, you know, it's John Wayne. Of course I want a close-up. It's John Wayne. He gets a close-up in every movie. They're not necessary, and a lot of directors would have cut them to save on film. And I like that, like, we get big panning shots. We get extra scenes of them just riding the horses and moving the cattle. Like,
well, I think it's done to add a juxtaposition of the men to the land and also to the cattle, where all these close-ups are just layered on top of each other, where they're almost one and the same because this is their reality. And also we get that really pretty closing shot of the land itself.
We do. And also remember that just about everybody is doing their own horse riding for this, which is very impressive. Later on, we do have a few stand-ins and true cattlemen for the more dangerous scenes, but most of the riding, everybody did themselves.
And it's quickly done till we get to the first night, set with painted background, which we have it's a nice little go-between where we have this juxtaposition of the reality of it compared to, like, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, where it's so stagey.
It's so stagey.
We can kind of ignore the backgrounds because most of the backgrounds are done as, like, nighttime shots, whereas the daytime shots are on the land.
True. It also helps make the nighttime shots feel more paranoid because, I mean, it's Texas in the 1800s. There are no extra lights. It would have been dark as hell and scary.
Yeah. And we get a nice little comedic relief of Nadine and Quo, the Native American, which I do like that their little stupid rivalry.
It's so dumb, but I love it.
Yeah, it feels natural without, like, making Quo a stereotype.
Yes, and I mean, don't get me wrong. Both of these people are incredibly stereotyped, especially the Native American. But the way they handle it is he's not necessarily, like, the butt of every joke.
No.
He is just part of this movie.
Quo is not the butt of any joke. It's always Nadine is the part of the joke because he lost his teeth in the bet.
That's true. I forgot about the teeth.
Yeah, it's a nice little change in the stereotype that makes Quo more of a believable character rather than just like, oh, this is the one who tracks the land and shows us. He never is that.
No, he is a roper and a guard just like everybody else.
Exactly. And also we get Cherry deciding to come along because even though he's never was 100% part of the gang.
Might as well be.
Well, this is the other part where it's like, okay, you guys are being trying to be very subtle back in the day. Yeah, it's like, I've taken a liking to that gun of his.
Yeah, they swap guns and they go, wow, your gun's nice. You like my gun? My gun's nice too.
Mine curves a little to the left. Yeah. I noticed.
Yeah, it's not super subtle, but it is subtle enough to have made it past the censors back in the day. Yes. So,
because what else would they be talking about?
Honestly, knowing a few gun people, guns. They just been forever talking about guns.
But Cherry does also serve a purpose. He not just there to be the potential Matt interest.
True.
He says he's setting up really how dangerous the borderland is, where he's like, by the way, yeah, I've been to Missouri. Like, you guys probably aren't going to get around that, but hey, you know what? I heard of another route.
That's true.
And this is very early on. We get that little inkling of hope of like when shit goes to the fan, we're going to have this other route, and it's setting up these conflicts around the way in a very smart way that's not super obvious of like, well, we'll get to this point, and then we're going to have this conflict, so we have to go this way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, the movie does a great job of not just giving the audience the feeling that the characters have a way out, but also telling characters in very different scenarios, like, several ways. You have a potential way out.
But not yet, because Dunson is a hard ass, and he's like, have you seen the railroad?
That's true.
Seeing versus believing. That's what I was trying to say about this movie.
Dunson is very much a seeing versus believing.
He's like, I know there is a railroad station in this city in Missouri, and I can't remember this city. I meant to write it down because it is a city that's kind of near us, too.
Yeah, it is.
But, yeah, it's very much so they haven't seen... The West is still being established, so there's not a lot of news that's traveling. So, yeah. And you do understand Dunson at that point is... You can take the surefire route, there's danger along the way, or you can guess and completely miss anything.
True. Also, the city was Sedalia.
Sedalia? Okay.
I've been to Sedalia. It's nice.
Okay. But it's a slow and steady journey. We get the little bit of beginning of the uneasiness because one of the guys says it's too good of a journey.
I love this, though, because it also is setting up this stereotype that is super common in these old Westerns of overly superstitiousness. And normally it is a superstitiousness that is played on as like a, no, they're supposed to be superstitious because they're usually right. Like, it's how they learned the land. Yeah. This guy is, like, his friends are like, you keep yapping and don't shut up. You are going to bring the badness upon us.
Well, I mean, this is the era, like, maybe a little bit later, when jackalopes came into popularity because, of course, the rabbits out here in the dangerous West have horns. They can gore you.
True. But also, like, sometimes rabbits do grow.
Yeah, I know
anomalies.
We're not going down that route. We know that there's a little bit of potential truth, but it's not the jackalope.
It's like the mermaids. They were probably just manatees.
Imagine if we found out that deer's horns were a type of cancer that they weaponize. It's kind of what happens to rabbits.
Yeah, but
But not weaponized.
Yeah, as far as we know, rabbits are very violent. They might weaponize it. They'd beat your shit up if they could.
I could punt your rabbit.
I know you could. He'd try and fight you back.
Jesus. But we're also seeing that Dunson is already driving too hard.
Yeah, he's wearing out horses left and right. They're complaining about the speed he's going.
Yeah, we get a little bit of narration that he's changing a little bit too quickly. That desperation changes a man.
Yeah, he's acting harsher to his men than he has in the past runs.
Started butting the heads between Matt and Dunson. Mm-hmm. All against lots of pretty landscape shots.
Honestly, yeah, very beautiful. And the horse and cattle moving bits in between, fantastic. Absolutely amazing. I'm amazed they got all this on screen, because a lot of these stunts that they're doing with the cattle are incredibly dangerous.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. And also putting, like, your main men out there, too. But also, some of the writing, too, in this is great, where it's, like, little bits that feel natural with, like, the guy stealing sugar like he's a little kid. We saw that, like, right before the camping.
Yeah.
And he keeps trying to do it, and the old man kind of like, hey, piss off. You can't
keep doing this.
Exactly. Because that is exactly what leads into the stampede, because the time frame wise, they're 30 days into this trip.
Yeah, which honestly is not very long for a cattle haul.
No. And everyone is uneasy because the cattle are uneasy. There's coyote howling.
Yep.
The drive means everything to them. So, of course,
there's a lot on the line.
We get a little bit of care, and we get a little bit of lore about this one guy. And I think
there's a lot of superstition running around, too, which isn't helping.
Yeah, well, one of the guys who has a wife, we see how poor they are because a pair of red shoes is a luxury to him. And that's the main thing that's on his mind, is getting something nice for his wife.
Yeah.
And I know it's supposed to build a little care for this guy.
A little bit, but also he's on screen so little.
No, exactly. But I think it's a good way to show just how not backwoods, but how
removed from everything they are.
Dirt poor these people are.
Dirt poor, and also, like, it was not terribly uncommon to have ranches, far away, because you need room to graze that many head of cattle. Like, it takes a lot of grass and a lot of land to do that many. But there would not have been very often, like, the opportunity to buy anything. Like, him doing cattle runs would have probably been the only time that they got to buy anything for themselves that wasn't, provided by the ranch.
Yeah, or wasn't some provision.
Yes. So, granted, we don't specifically know how close they were to a fort or to a town. A lot of ranches did try and get kind of close to a town, because, it sure is nice to be able to buy things.
No.
But, I mean, during this time period, everything was very, very removed. And yeah, being all the way up in Sedalia probably would have been as close as he could have gotten to, like, the big markets in Kansas City or in St. Louis.
Nope, exactly. But the stampede is started because of the sugar whore knocking over a bunch of pots and pans.
God damn it. And also, in case anyone was wondering, are cattle really that stupid and scared? Yes. Yes, they are.
No, we work with people who raise cattle. They hate cattle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So when they were stampeding, and I watched it because some guy accidentally knocked 2 pots together, I went, yep. Yeah, that feels correct.
Well, I mean, we had the coyotes and everything,
too. Yeah. Well, and on top of that, it's supposed to also be like, they have done nothing but, like, the background characters have done nothing but talk about how this is going too well. And so, like, granted, it's a little bit of movie magic, but, like, this is really meant to, like, put that home that, like, there is no such thing as a perfect cattle run. Something has to go to shit.
Yeah, it's a little sped up to add to the speed of it, the danger of the numbers, death of the dude wanting the shoes, and the destruction of one of the wagons.
I will say that despite not showing death on screen, the way they film the death of the guy who wants shoes, since he is stampeded over, is done in such a way to, like, really hammer home that, like, he is being run over by several 1,000-pound animals.
Yeah, no, it's a much better end than the fucking Golem game. Oh, yeah. Do you know how that game fucking ends?
No, because every version I've ever watched, it's broken, so no one gets to the end.
Yeah, so spoilers, I'm a little pissy about this, and it does kind of tie in because it happens fucking off screen. Gollum strangles the guy off screen. That's the big climax of that damn game, and it doesn't work as well like this movie.
I'm so sorry that you were so disappointed. I, on the other hand, was not disappointed in the death of this. No. Despite it being off screen, the way they film it with having the camera being under the cattle and having that one guy actually make it out just barely by being picked up by the 2 horsemen.
Matt and Cherry specifically, to show that they're working well together.
Exactly. Like, it is a very tense scene, especially because they show cattle, like, truly running at full speed. Like, whoever they got to do the horse riding for this, good on them, because this was a very dangerous scene to film.
No.
Like, exactly. Yes, it is sped up a little bit, but honestly not that much. And you can tell by the way the humans move.
No, it's not the, like, God, what was it? With the movie we covered, I think it was different from the others where, like, they doubled the speed.
Yeah,
and, like,
where you can, like, really see it.
Yeah.
You can almost hear the sound of the tape being sped up.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this one, if they sped it up just a little bit because they were not going full speed, but it is not sped up enough for the humans' actions to be impacted very greatly, so, like, it still feels incredibly dangerous.
Nope. But the aftermath is great, too, because it does show dead cattle all around them, too, so it's not just deadly for the people, it's deadly for the animals as well.
Yeah, and that's loss of lots of money for them.
And it also feels realistic, too, where it's not trying to be over the top. That's what's great about all of this, too, is despite the drama that happens around everything, you do feel the danger and the need for all of this.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
We also learn they're decent men. They're going to save the body, watch over it, and read over it in the morning while they rustle up what cows they can.
That's true. And the way everyone discusses it, though, gives you such a bad feeling. Mm-hmm. Because instead of being like, wow, that was really rough, I'm glad everyone's safe, it's more of like, you fucking idiots, find the dead, pick up the cattle, we'll deal with this shit in the morning.
Exactly.
As opposed to, like, any form of true caring.
Well, because that's what they do. I mean, this is where Dunson really turns from being kind of pushy to really turning cruel.
Yeah, no, he is pushing them along, in which, honestly, they probably deserve a full day tomorrow to rest and bury everybody. He's saying, like, finish this tonight, get what you can, we leave as soon as we can.
Bury everyone? There's just one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that we don't even remember his name.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people like that in this movie, honestly.
Yeah, but it's also to show that Dunson that desperation has driven him to really be a tyrant, where he's gonna lash this guy, tie him to a wheel and lash him, like really old school, like medieval style punishment. And the guy's like, I did not mean for any of this to happen. He's like, too late, you're gonna have to take it.
And he was gonna shoot him. He was gonna kill him.
Well, he was gonna shoot him because the other guy was gonna shoot him instead.
True, but I think it's the Candy character. I can't remember.
Yeah, the sugar whore.
Yeah. He even like brings up. He's like, "You were just gonna kill him. You could have disarmed him. You're good enough marksman."
No. What happened? It was the sugar whore who was gonna get punished.
Yeah.
Matt saves him by shooting him in the leg.
That's right.
Because Dunson was gonna kill him instead, which is also showing that Matt is starting to overtake his old man.
Yes.
He's now faster than him.
Yes.
And he's also honestly the right one in this situation, where he's like,
yes, no, yeah, for sure. But also, damn well that Dunson could have just disarmed him. He is a good enough shot. It's like they talk about it several times.
Nope, but Dunson's clad iron rules.
Yeah, no, he's definitely moved past just a firm fist and my way or the highway. We've now moved into just like, all right, we're becoming cruel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that doesn't help anyone, because the plotting of this movie, the stampede really is that turning point of, it's gone from bad to worse, because
this is the bad thing they were talking about.
Yep. Rain, mud, and the terror of Dunson, who everyone is now getting all paranoid because they don't know exactly when Dunson's going to turn on them if they screw up.
Yeah.
They've got poor rations. They're even tired of beef, because I guess that's all they're eating, because that one wagon we saw destroyed.
That was their food.
Yep. And just really showing how difficult this drive was, going from like a very simple, okay, we're doing pretty good, we're a little playful, to
this is terrible. Yeah.
And we also have not only that, hey, we're in a bad situation, we have a dying rancher that shows up that's saying, hey, Missouri's not good. We just left there. There was border gangs.
Yeah, and I'm the only one who made it.
Barely.
Yeah.
And only because the rope snapped.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but that doesn't stop Dunson.
No, he's very hard iron that, hey, we're going to go to Missouri, which that's where the writing brings up hey, there's a closer railroad that's not going through the border people.
Yeah, it's in Kansas, which would divert, and it would, like, they keep saying closer. It's closer by, like, a day from where they are, ish. But it's not through gang-infested territory.
Exactly.
Granted, and they don't really talk about it, but a lot, but it's occasionally, like, sort of brought up a little bit. A huge part of the reason Dunson wants to go to Missouri, as opposed to changing course and going out to Kansas, is because he would have gotten a better price at the Missouri markets. The beef has less travel to get to the big cities. They've got a bigger market there, theoretically, as opposed to going to the Kansas one, which he talks about, like,
no, it's Oklahoma they're going for.
Is it? Or are they going for Kansas?
I'm pretty sure it's Oklahoma, because Oklahoma's just north of Texas. It'd make more sense to go to Oklahoma than go all the way through Oklahoma to Missouri.
That's true. So yeah, even if they go to Oklahoma, like, he would have had a better price in Missouri. He talks about it, like, very briefly at one point, where he's like, no, we gotta stay on track. Like, that's where we're gonna make our money's worth out of doing this shit.
I don't think it's 100% that. Like I said, it's very much so he's like, I've seen the railroad there. Can you guarantee there's going to be a railroad up in Oklahoma when we cross the border?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's also a lot of this, like, doubt, and also, especially towards this point in the movie, it also just feels like he won't hear any ideas. Like, he is super set in this way. It's like at the beginning where he talks about like why he's picked that spot instead of trying to sell somewhere else in Texas.
Yeah, he's a very stubborn old man is what he is now.
He has definitely reached that point, yeah.
Which, this is where we actually do get the mutiny started out of desperation, which is great tension at the campfire shootout.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband probably would have hated it because, though not as long as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it's still a little bit of a long...
A little bit, but I think this one plays off quicker than Good, Bad, and the Ugly. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly sets up, like, a character development version of that. Yeah. Whereas this one is much more of a, like, okay, whose side is who on? And it plays through quick enough and then, like, pays out with, like, who's giving who guns, who's, like, part of this rebellion, who's talking to who. That, like, you get through it fast enough, and there's also... Don't get me wrong, the music in this is very good. And the music gets reused for several other movies. I think John Wayne's in all of them.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not either. I'm not sure about that, but I feel like a lot of them are also John Wayne movies.
Yeah, it's like the Wilhelm scream was part of a generic Western scream track.
Yeah, this music was not generic. It was written specifically for Red River, and like the music for this point is not the big song that everyone remembers and is what gets reused, but it is very impactful. But it is not the long drawn out and like hyper limited instrumental of The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, or the Ugly. Sorry, both
soundtracks.
Well, because one's parroting the other.
Yeah. But this is also the moment that really drives the wedge between Dunson and Matt.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Their methodology. When we also get a little bit of comedic relief with Nadine pouring booze over his wound twice just to, like, really rub it in.
Yeah, just really make sure you feel it.
But we do get a good drama bit where we see this shift from Dunson and Matt, where Dunson sends Cherry to go find 2 people who have deserted, or 3 people who have deserted in the morning. Mm-hmm. I also think it might be to keep him a little bit safe, because going to catch deserters, even if you're quick with your gun, you could die pretty easily.
Oh yeah, there's 3 against 1, essentially.
Exactly. But I also think it's more so to show that Matt's no longer his number one hand anymore. That's kind of going to Cherry.
Yeah, especially since Cherry seems to be following the rules a little better than Matt. And
even though we know that's not the true, because Cherry's just the one who's not talking to Dunson right away. He is talking to Matt about like, no, there's always Oklahoma.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's part of the like pre-release version that like is edited a little bit. There's some of the narrator's lines where like the narrator is meant to be Matt or Dunson, and they're talking about stuff that like they don't know, whereas the narrator in the other version is narrator, and it's Nadine, who honestly probably does hear all of this, so it's fine.
Oh, Nadine is the neutral character in all of this. He is the in-between of the 2 men.
Oh yes, for sure.
Now we have probably one of the more famous scenes in this movie is the Red River crossing, which is cool. You get to see the cattle in action, more cowboy stuff.
Oh no, it's such a cool cowboy scene.
Mm-hmm. But it's also to show that Dunson and Matt are now arguing about work, because it's still an arduous journey, regardless of things finally going well after a long period of bullshit.
Well, things going well can only help so much if Dunson's still being a dick.
Yeah, no, exactly. He's not even happy with a good job, and he's like, no, we got to get them all across. Like, we got them all across, but hey, we got to keep going. It's just really...
As opposed to letting everyone rest and have a drink.
Yeah, no, it's really ramping up his desperation and kind of his, not insanity, but his madness.
Yeah. And
really turning Matt away fully, where Cherry finally returns to the point that no one wants to deal with Dunson anymore, and the mutiny's everyone's on Matt's side, because they're like, we might have a better chance going to Oklahoma compared to you that might kill us all before we get across the border, or before we even get to Missouri.
True. Yeah.
But we get a little bit that Matt's fully taking control, leaving Dunson, at least with supplies, enough to make it to the last city or the next city.
Yep.
Because Abilene's looking a little too good, which solid build of tension from the mutiny that, hey, everyone's still kind of looking around their back. They've set the timeline of, hey, we've done this, but he's going to come and kill you, Matt. And
you going to keep running?
We know he already tried to kill one person before. Well, he's killed people. He's killed 2 people.
Yeah, he's already killed people.
And you've got 10 days, basically, which really shortens up the drive compared to what we have, which we get a bunch of, like, little bullshit in between too.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's also a good show showing that Matt's a much better leader because he's more cared about his men.
Mm-hmm.
The couple scouts that have gone up ahead, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we found a caravan. They got gambling, booze, and more importantly, women.
Ooh, we should stop.
But you know what? We'll all go. It's not just gonna be us. It's gonna be all of us.
Yeah, which, especially compared to what we've been seeing with Dunson so far, while honestly not necessary, does make you feel more like Matt is a collective leader as opposed to just the hard fist.
Mm-hmm. He's a very, I guess you could say, humanitarian leader for the time. He understands that men need rest.
He's a rancher of the people.
Sure.
I don't know.
But we do get a little bit of danger that they see some arrows that are in Comanche territory.
Yep.
But you know what? Coffee and food is more important.
Yep, they're tired. I don't blame them.
This is kind of the part where Cherry dies off as a rival because they're told that Cherry didn't come back with them because he found a woman. Yeah,
but also the role of Cherry is kind of over. Matt stepped into the role that we knew he was going to eventually take.
Yeah, he doesn't need the rival of Cherry like you typically would think of in a coming of age story. That is a kind of weird thing that this is very much so a Matt kind of coming of age movie. If that age was like you're in your mid to late 20s.
Well, I mean, if Dunson wasn't such an ass, probably by this point in Matt's life, he should have had most of the command of this branch.
Or at least half of it.
Because they talk a few times about how Dunson's an old man. Like, are you sure you want to be riding this late? Are you sure you've been running this hard? Like, you're at retirement age, my man. Like, you could step back and just do the bookkeeping and let Matt actually be out there riding.
Yeah, you're getting a little too old for the groundwork.
Yeah.
Which we do get now, that stereotype of Comanche have surrounded the caravan, and
this is the most stereotypical one. It is fun if you can put on hold the terribly insensitive portrayal of everyone, but it is the most cowboys and Indians of the whole movie.
Very much so. And it's also funny because it's supposed to be that, like, we saw in the last train that the Comanche took out every single person, except for Matt, but in this turnaround, a bunch of white men can take out 100 warriors.
Well, that's because our main man's with them, and we know he's the best gunslinger in the movie anyway.
Yeah, well, he also meets a female gunslinger who he gets to slap around a little bit too.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where I do give the writing some credit for its time period, and also, like, the time period it was trying to write for.
Mm-hmm.
She is not written as, like, the most stereotypical Southern Belle ranch girl. Normally these ones are written to, like, not really make a whole lot of fuss. She makes a lot of fuss to the point of putting a gun on them, which, for the time, pretty good. I'll take it. She's, as they would say, a feisty one.
Yes.
Is she the best portrayal of women in the South during the cowboy age? No. There's so many others who were writing and were doing stuff too. However, for a movie, she's not the worst.
Yeah, for a Western, she's not the, oh, I'm gonna submit. She kind of fights with him a little bit, and then he's like, no, woman, you must sleep, and pulls a Captain Kirk on her.
Oh yeah, no, it just knocks her the fuck out.
Oh,
but at the same time, like, she also bullies him around. She eventually bullies Dunson around as well.
Yeah.
Like, she is clearly the more level-headed, despite her constantly yelling at them.
No, not even that. Like, she doesn't, she only, like, has that one scene with Matt where she's yelling at him.
But honestly, for how much she's in this movie, it might as well be her whole thing.
Well, when she comes to, she's like, ooh, I'm ready for him.
Well, you know what? She is honestly on screen for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, well,
so like, you gotta do whatever.
I do gotta say, even though like she talks and shoots the shit with Matt, but yeah, we have 30 minutes of the movie left, and she does have a very I will say she is the important bridge between Matt and Dunson.
Yes, she is the one who can, in a sense, slap some sense into them.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And I mean, we get the little hint that they went off to the woods and they had what mature adults do alone.
It's a Western. Why not?
Yeah, but it's the late 40s, so you gotta gloss over it a little bit. So it cuts away as they embrace, really.
On top of being a Saturday periodical based off of, so of course there's nothing scandalous. It was published in the papers.
I mean, it depends on what you consider scandalous at the time.
Well, they consider hand-holding and kissing scandalous, so here we are.
Numb elbows.
Can't have any of that ankle.
But now it's time for the final push because it's raining and shit could get really bad because even though they stopped, Dunson's quite on their trail.
Yeah, and as we know, he's relentless. Rain won't stop him.
And Matt's much like his old man where he leaves the love interest behind yet again.
You know, at least they're consistent in their father-son relationship.
Well, it's also setting her apart as kind of like, you know, she can take care of her own. Like, he's not going ahead and leaving her because they'll never meet again.
I will say that, like, the way they word it is different enough from Dunson's reasoning. Matt's reasoning is like, I'll see you again, I just need to keep going, and you're not ready to go. Like, we will meet back up when we're both good for it. Whereas Dunson's reasoning was, no, it's not a woman's place.
No, exactly. Which Dunson is, we finally get back to Dunson for heading out for revenge, catching up and meeting the woman who I can't remember what her name is now.
Doesn't really matter, because she's the only one in the movie.
The other blonde woman. They're both blonde, I think.
Well,
is she blonde?
I mean, it's a black and white from 1948. They're either blonde or brunette. There's only the two colors. Blonde hair and black hair. Those are the only colors that showed up on the screen.
Tess is brunette.
Okay.
But it's also tying back to how Dunson is catching on to, like, what her relationship is real quickly because he notices the bracelet. It's like, oh yeah, he gave that to you, didn't he? Or did you take that from him? Well,
we glossed over it, but that's because he had given his son that bracelet because it was his late mother's bracelet. So, you know, it had it wasn't like, oh, he gave you a bracelet, he must like you, wink, wink. It's like a sentimental token that's been passed down.
No, because remember, he gave it to the woman in the first scene who got killed, and then he took it off the Comanche that took it from her.
Yes, and then he gave it to his son.
Yeah, kind of like passing down your grandmother's wedding ring, but for some reason it's a bracelet this time, which why did his grandma give him a bracelet?
Because they're poor in Texas and she only had a bracelet. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think also partially from like a movie writing standpoint, you don't want a ring. Ring would imply marriage.
True.
Necklace, a little strange, could have worked. Bracelet shows up nicely on the camera.
Because if you're going to go necklace, it's got to be a locket, and you got to have photos in it, which that's only for the wealthy folk.
Well, and also just like the way the costuming is done and the way most of this is filmed. The bracelet is like a big chunky thing that like shows up nicely on the camera. It's got like this big old pendant-y thing that like you can't really see what it is, but you can see that it's big and shiny. And so like, yeah, it's hard to miss. It fits in. It's fine. Yeah. It's better than like toe ring.
Dungeon Crawler Carl reference right there.
Yeah, there you go.
This scene is also great in building the tension of Dunson is on that warpath. But it's also setting up Tess as this strong character where she can say anything she wants, and not only that, she cuts him off mid-sentence.
Oh no, she like full on tells him mind his fucking business, and he does.
Exactly. But I also love that they don't trust each other, where he's like, you can put the gun away.
And she's like, you too, bitch.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, this is the part where I will say, for the time, and even for today's writing, she is a strong female character.
She is. She just has almost no movie time, because she's at the very end.
No, and only... Well, and 4 scenes.
Yeah, the way she's written is a lot of fun. Is she the most, like, amazing female role? No, we will eventually talk about the westerns with good female leads in them. But she is an interesting character.
No, exactly. But that's why I think she stands out so well, is because, one, this movie's been a sausage fest.
It sure has.
And she's the prettiest thing we've seen since the first opening of the movie.
True, and while it's never, like, a huge trope, it is somewhat of a trope for especially older movies. Westerns do it a little bit, because, time period. To have, like, your two mains, even if they are, like, supposed to be father and adopted son, to both be impressed by the same woman. Even if it's very clear that, like, one of them is an ancient old crusty man and the other is her love interest.
Well, I don't think Dunson's even really that interested in her. He was more so, he recognizes she loves him. Yeah. But
he does, there is that one line where he goes, where do you even find a woman like that?
Well, because, hey, men love strong women.
That's true. They're both impressed by her. So, like, there's some rekindling of...
Yeah. Well, I think it's Dunson's more of a level of respect of like, hey, my son's doing well, but also at the same time,
definitely.
When he solicits her to be like, hey, I'm still young enough, you could bear a child for me, and she's like, will you not kill him?
Yeah.
It's not only him being sleazy, but it's his way of, if she fathers his child, he's still going to go and kill Matt, but it's his way of hurting Matt one more time, or one other time that he can.
For sure, but she won't have any of his shit.
No, she's just like, you're not even going to follow through with it. I don't trust you.
Yeah, no. Get out of here, dirtbag.
Mm-hmm. We're kind of at the tail end where the trail, they're kind of like, well, shit, maybe we screwed up, until they see the railway tracks.
Yep, and then all is saved.
Yeah. Better out than going to Missouri. No real showdown or conflict with Cherry, as predicted earlier on.
Fairly amicable separating of ways.
We've gone 3 months in an hour and 40 minutes.
Honestly, this is one of the smaller time gaps, but it's fine. I don't really care.
Yeah, it's not like 3:10 to Yuma, where the movie's set. The time frame of the movie is the entire time frame of what happens in the movie.
Yes, exactly.
But, oh no, they find out the Duke is here. Even success won't fix it. They are actually getting good money here for it. They got more than they would have in Missouri.
Which is impressive.
Because this town's desperate, just as desperate as Texas.
Yep.
But, you know, Matt's gonna be a man and face his consequences, and...
Which is honestly an impressive, like, moral, I guess, for a Western movie, because a lot of the time, facing of the consequences is just killing the other man, and, like, Matt really does seem like he's going to at least have a conversation before he kills Dunson.
Yeah, it's the typical gun show showdown, and also, like, there's a little bit of romance the night before, and at this point, Tess devolves, unfortunately, into a very stereotypical kind of whiny female role.
She does. From a Western writing standpoint, I see why this sort of, like, whininess is brought on to help give the main character, like, a purpose for doing the last final, like, big act, facing their final fears, and also having the audience understand, like, what the implications are, so that we are very certain that we know that, like, no, don't do it, he'll kill you. We do need to be told.
It's like the woman before of, no, don't go into the Wild West. Follow us with the train, or with the rest of the train, or take me with you.
Yeah. No, like, I get why they were written this way. Like, it was part of the storytelling device. It's a way for the audience to truly fully understand, like, what the options are being offered to the character here, and why them choosing to, like, face the impossible odd is, like, the bigger man sort of thing. I don't love it, but I get it, and she only does it the once, so it's whatever.
Yeah, and the rest of the scene's actually really good in building up how successful Matt has been over the past 10 days. Is not only is the mayor of this town not wanting this guy to die, he brings it up to Cherry that, hey, this man's a good man, and I don't want to see him die, and everyone's like, and he's like, neither do any of us. And so it's like, okay, well, Matt's completely won these guys over.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, Matt has replaced Dunson as head of this party.
Yeah, these men will die for Matt, and a couple of them do.
That's true, that is true.
It also does make me question, because, I mean, it's a good release of frustration in the final showdown.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much Dunson promised the other posse to pay, so...
Yeah, that's true.
And who's gonna pay for that? Is that gonna be out of Dunson's pocket, or is that gonna be through cutting some of the shares down now?
Yeah, unclear. Does Dunson even have the money to be offering? Probably not.
Yeah. And also, this is the final bit where Matt really does fight back, because he's not fighting back originally. He's like, I'm not gonna fight you, old man.
No, and like every time Dunson has made a bad call, Matt will quickly say, like, but this is why, and Dunson will go, no, we're moving on. Mm-hmm. And Matt has, up until this point, gone like, well, Dunson said, let's go.
Yeah, and it takes a woman to stop them, which is...
It's just funny.
Yeah, it's an interesting twist on... Instead of them actually having our traditional shootout and one of them dying, like in the story itself.
I was gonna say, in the story, that is how it ends.
Yeah, Dunson's character does, or he's on his deathbed, and I don't think there was supposed to be a woman involved. It was just like...
I don't think the lady was involved. I think in the original story, Dunson dies here, and Matt takes his body back to Texas. Mm-hmm. And I believe they have a shootout, and, everybody's dead. But I like the movie version better. I like what they finally, like, get over themselves a little. Yeah, what it is it takes a feminine softness to
let them know that they love each other. Because she's very blunt about it. It's like,
oh, feminist softness. She points a gun at them and goes, beat each other up. I dare you, do it. And then storms away.
No. She's like, it's her, like, playing frustration where she's just like, you guys love each other. Stop it. You know what? I don't care anymore.
That's true. But she does point a gun at them.
Yeah. Because they are big dipshits.
They really are.
And it ends with Dunson be like, here's going to be our new brand.
And he finally puts the M on that logo.
Yep. Father, son joined together and it's the start of the trail. I can't remember the
a new ranch.
The Chisholm Trail, that's what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the main theme plays out as we get our last final credits. Again, this is the song that, like, is most well known for it. It is a good, catchy tune. I like it. It gets reused a lot. And the brand that gets put here at the end is the brand on the infamous belt buckle.
Oh, I forgot about this damn thing.
So the belt buckles. I'm going to go over just real quick before we get to the last little bit. So the belt buckles were real. The director created them. They were solid silver with real plated gold on them. And they were handed out as tokens to several of the higher members of the staff. Wayne famously had one, and Wayne and Hawks exchanged their belt buckles to show mutual respect for each other. Wayne famously wore this belt buckle in a bunch of other movies, even ones that Hawk wasn't a part of, just to kind of show how much he enjoyed working with Hawk and how much he enjoyed this movie's particular. The legend is that a bunch of other people got, about 15-ish other people on the crew got some. However, the director can't remember exactly how many, and he's kind of pulling from just like what other people have been like, yeah, I had one. He had 2 sizes made, one for the men, one for the ladies. The ladies got a smaller buckle.
So we can confirm there's 2 ladies' belts.
I believe some of the side casting crew also got buckles. It is not clear because by the time he was really interviewed about this, it was way later in the director's life, because at the time it was just seen as like a goodwill gesture.
Like Keanu buying the VXF crew of the of Matrix motorcycles.
Yeah, so like, a cool fun fact, but not necessarily like big news. So like no one thought to like keep track of these things, and this is, the 1940s and 50s, like, stuff happens, nobody really is keeping track of anything, not a big deal. Except by the time Wayne was much older, his son took the buckle to a silversmith to have it cleaned and then to have duplicates made for all of his children. While at the silversmith, the buckle was stolen and theoretically sold. A lot have shown back up over the years claiming to be the original. However, the actual buckle has never been seen again. The buckle made at least 9 other appearances in movies, probably more, but because John Wayne snuck it on. And he wore it outside of the films too. He was very famous for being photographed with this belt buckle on. And no one has seen it since, and that's why it was brought back up to the director and oh my gosh, how many other ones are these? And he's like, I don't know, man. I had a bunch made.
I can 100% confirm from looking at your screen, It is not the Pootie Tang belt.
It is, in fact, not the Pootie Tang belt. The Pootie Tang belt is very 90s gangstery, whereas this is the most standard Western belt a man could possibly own.
It's just a D with 2 rivers, or 2 squiggly lines, really. And
it is,
rope on the outside.
It is the brand from the Red River. It says Red River, the date, and then has a lasso around the buckle. It is again, if you know ranchers, this is the most standard freaking piece of rancher belt equipment on the planet. However, it was solid silver, so it got stolen.
That thing would hurt if you got hit by it.
Oh, it sure as hell would have. But yeah, it was part of the solicitation was that it wasn't even stolen out of Wayne's dressing room or his camper or even his house. It was stolen while trying to make duplicates for his children.
This is gonna sound horrible from that time, but can you imagine taking a beating in the 50s as a kid?
Oh, that belt would have freaking hurt. From
a famous belt too. I'll be like, yeah, that's the belt I got beat with as a kid, was the John Wayne belt.
Not even that. John Wayne famously wore very thick leather belt, real leather belts. None of this soft fake leather that we have nowadays. That would have been a stiff belt.
Ugh. Yeah.
Did John Wayne beat his children? Probably not. No. I don't know. I have no proof of that statement.
I'm not inferring anything. I just a dumbass thought that came to my mind that
However,
it was a different time.
This was a big chunky belt buckle, and that is where the scandal of the belt buckle comes in. It is not present in this movie. The belt buckles were made after the filming, but it was made because everyone enjoyed working together, and specifically with John Wayne so much, that the director said, you know what, we need mementos from this.
I could see.
Yeah.
But I can totally see why Red River holds up.
Yeah.
Because it is so much in the line of the spirit of independence and the whole pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
And it's a great example of Westerns in general, which were popular during this time period. It's beautifully shot. It's one of...
It's beautifully shot at times, I'd say.
Oh, yes. There's definitely its moments. But for the most part, especially for a Western, especially for a long Western, this looks really good. There's not a ton of like, wow, that's clearly a stage. Wow, this is clearly a sound room.
Yeah, well, I think it's also just... It's simple entertainment, but also has some good morals and has a good, decent story behind it that also reflects, like I said, Hawk's idea of make 2 or 3 good scenes, but don't annoy the audience with the rest. I think Zack Snyder could learn a thing or two from this, but...
I agree.
I don't know. I think there's something so Americana about this movie, and with classic Westerns, and I'm going to say in general, granted, spaghetti Westerns are more my thing, but...
Sure. But...
This, when you imagine the Wild West and the cattle driving. Wild West and cattle driving.
Yeah.
Not just Wild West or Wild West, because Wild West you think of like the OK Corral, Gunsmoke,
I would
those
say,
movies.
Yeah.
The Quick and the Dead.
Yeah.
I just think there's something simple that Red River captured so well that's the reason it holds up today.
Oh, I completely agree. This movie still is good. I remember watching it way back before I was like really into all of the Westerns. Like, this was one of the first ones that we were like, oh, we're watching John Wayne, we're watching Red River. And this movie it still holds up today. It still looks and sounds fantastic. It still feels like the most quintessential Western, and also John Wayne is fantastic in it. This movie was so impactful that John Wayne's last movie, a lot of the scenes were shot from this to show his progression throughout his life. He saw this as a huge moment in his career, and I totally see why. This was fantastic. Everyone in it did a great job.
Yeah, no, it definitely stands up. And we can even see the inklings of where the rest of the Western genre would go. Granted, I haven't done a full history dive on this one, but or the Western genre in general. But it is that focus on the land. And it doesn't go so heavily on the land, but the land is an integral part to the life and death of everything in this.
Yes.
That the landscape shots, you can see that rippling through other films later on.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not gonna tie in Kurosawa because I'm pretty sure his more was Henry Ford.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely see that.
But yeah, Red River is just that simple, classic movie. So I guess, Chris, what do you rate this movie?
For me, this is just good. It doesn't have any weird elements in it. It has some moments where it's not great, but a lot of that does come down to just it being aged, and while I do normally appreciate the Criterion versions of stuff, sometimes that scrubbing and also watching it on a fancy TV that tries to fill in the freaking gaps for me, it does change the viewing experience.
I turned that shit off immediately.
Someone keeps turning it back on.
I wonder who.
Yeah, I know. But so I watched it on the big screen first. I still enjoyed it. I still had a great time watching it. I did watch it on my much older TV that has a better aspect ratio for older movies and is traditional, thick boy, staticky. You know, you can really taste it in the air. And it honestly did clear up a lot of my issues by watching it that way. So, like, I don't think there's enough bad in it to give it a bad rating. So for me, just a standard good movie.
No, and I have to agree. I give it the good rating. I don't think that the quote-unquote bad parts are, well, not acceptable by today's standards and not good. They're easily overlooked because they don't go...
They don't go ham.
They don't go ham. They don't, like, specifically the Native Americans in the movie. We only have a couple shots with them. And yeah, at the time they were attacking people because we were invading their land. But also, the one guy he's only in the couple movie a couple times. I can't remember his name. He's a comedic character that kind of breaks that standard stereotype. A lot of the older Westerns, the romantic relationship between man and woman is a bit rapey at times, and
yeah, this one never quite hits there.
No, it follows the very traditional romance of, hey, she loves him because he's a strong man, he loves her because she's a strong woman. Yeah,
no, this movie is and also, like, some Westerns we've talked about are not necessarily rated E for everybody, not just because of what's included, but also just because, like, Some of the settings are just honestly super dry and boring. A lot of them are war movies, essentially, just on horses. I would argue this one is fairly approachable.
You know what's rated E for everyone?
These hands?
John Wayne's hands.
John Wayne's hands. In this movie, definitely. Man, there's a lot of punching and slapping.
Not really. There's minimal, I think.
It's more than I wanted.
So, Chris, would you recommend Red River?
Of course I would. I love this movie. I understand that most people don't think that they would be interested in Westerns. I would argue Red River is a great intro. There's not a whole lot of, history you need to learn. There's not a whole lot of movie knowledge that you need to get into it. And this is one of John Wayne's better roles.
Yeah, I agree. I would recommend Red River, just an initial rewatch. It is such a classic piece of Americana that it is worth watching at least once, even if you're not into Westerns. If you're a film nerd, I'm sure people will watch this multiple times, and I know I'm probably going to get hate from some people of, at least watch it once. I don't think it's a rewatch constantly, but if you're doing a Western block, definitely Red River.
Oh, for sure.
But it's a new season and a new game in that time of the show where we play Season 6 Bingo. Chris and I are playing bingo, and you can too. Rules for players are simple. 1 stamp per card per episode. Cards can be found on our socials at TGTBTW _podcast on Instagram and Threads, and TGTBTW podcast on Twitter. Or you're free to email us a request at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. You can use any of the 3 bingo card variations, but stamps must be associated with a Season 6 episode. First place gets to pick a movie that they would like us to do a deep dive on and 2 micro-reviews for Season 7. Second place gets to choose a deep dive and 1 micro-review. Third place gets to choose 2 micro-reviews. Fourth and fifth place get to choose a micro-review. So feel free to share and add us on social media or email us for participation. Rules are slightly different for Chris and myself. We only get 2 stamps per deep dive. First to get a bingo in either any of the good, bad, or weird cards gets to choose a movie they feel fit that category for Season 7. So, Chris, what are you marking for bingo today?
So, off my good card, I'm going with showing and not telling. I really do think this movie does a great job of doing the most for a character's story arc, for having a pretty long one, without me being, hand-led through everyone's feelings for the whole thing.
And that's on your good card.
That is on my good card. On my bad card, I was originally going to go with the baddie is kind of right, because while Dunson is rude and mean and kills a lot of people, he's kind of right sometimes. However, I'm going to back out of that one in favor of Animal Dies, because boy, a lot of cows.
Yeah, that's accurate. All right. I'm going to go on my good card is character breaks a stereotype. Even though it's a very minimal break, I still think it's a significant break in creating a strong woman, as well as
I would agree,
not portraying a minority as, while it's still a comedic relief, it's a believable comedic relief because he's the straight man compared to...
I was going to say, he's not out here telling us which way the wind is whispering to him.
No, or telling us the color of the breeze.
No, he is sure not. He's just a guy out here winning teeth from a weird man.
Yeah, which I don't think he ever gives them back to him.
No, he doesn't.
That storyline kind of ends after 2 scenes of the joke.
Yeah, they kind of play it off, and then they're like, you bastard, you took my teeth, and then never again.
And on the opposite side, I'm going to go with my bad card of old stereotypes because it still has some old stereotypes that are a bit cheesy and...
Oh, it sure does. The flaming arrow that honestly, seems to be on a string that hits the very beginning, it's honestly real bad.
It's a movie of its time.
It sure is, but it is a delightful movie of its time.
Anywho, this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.